Hi, I'm Blood Moon, and today I'd like to share with you a project I've been working on over the past few days. A pair of Hibiscus-inspired fursuit paws. Of course, these won't go with Blood Moon, but it could open a door to an interesting little project in the future. Now, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I really don't like making paws, which is really kind of the reason why I took this project on. I wanted to do something a little bit more intricate and detailed because, really, they're just not my favorite thing to do. Now, to be fair, I can't find who actually created this pattern, but I ended up modifying it quite a bit by dropping hibiscus flower on top, and then kind of splitting it in half. That way when I put the two paws together, hopefully it'll make a single big flower. But that didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted, but it came pretty darn close. So for most of you that don't know, I'm a fairly new furry. I've been in the fandom for just about a year now, and I made my first fursuit, Blood Moon, an Eastern Circle, about the same time I became a furry. I really kind of enjoy making the fursuits, and overall, I've just kind of wanted to take on little projects that slowly improve my skills each time. So with this project, I'm focusing on the pattern work. I really want to make sure that I can actually work on some more complex patterns in the future. And I figured, why not go ahead and try making a set of paws that were a little bit more complex than I've been used to. So one of the big things I tried to do was really maintain my seam allowances, which on this project were really about only the width of a Sharpie mark. I found that really gave me about the perfect amount for the patterns to lie flat when I sewed them together by hand. And I'll tell you what, this project was pretty much all hand sewing, which kinda sucks. So I found over the past year that my personal preference right now is using a razor blade to cut patterns out of the fur. I'm definitely not saying that a good sharp pair of scissors aren't as good or probably better than a razor blade, but for me, I find that I'm a lot more controlled with a razor blade than I am with scissors, and I tend to cut the fur fibers on the backside a whole lot less. And if you want to know the true secret behind why I really tend to use the razor blade, because look at those cheap scissors. They're only like $5 or something like that. The good scissors? Well, they're my daughter's, and they're with her over in her dorm room. I think it's about time that I break down and buy myself a good set of scissors, but anyways, that'll be a problem for later. Right now, it's all about hand sewing, and hand sewing is pretty much the name of the game on this project, which is pretty much non-stop. Again, I really want these patterns just to lie flat, and so far it's looking pretty good. There's no weird bunching going on, so I see it a little bit over closest to my body, but overall that works out pretty flat once I start pulling and tweaking it out. And yes, I said tweaking, not quirking. There's a difference. One thing I didn't quite do was really get that pre-shave just as close as I'd like to, so I ended up having to come back through and shave it again, but that was after the paws were assembled, which really makes it a whole lot more difficult because everything's just a lot more lumpier and not as easy to get a nice, even, flat shave at that point. And really at this point, I'm just trying to kind of see, will the pattern work out the way I'm hoping, and will I get that center point of the flower to really fold in the right spot? Well, it kind of does, but really in the end, it's off by just a few centimeters. Not a big deal. Again, the big point of this project is working on the pattern. I think I've mentioned this a time or two before, but I really hate making paws. This set, they weren't as bad as they could have been. I kind of had fun. I think it was mainly because all the pattern work was keeping me entertained, but in the end, there's just so many little pieces, and it gets a little finicky. And looking back at making paws, really I think all the problems I have with making paws really lies with just the fact I know what's coming next. It's probably the most painful part of the entire process. That is, sewing Mochi Minky onto the paw pads. Making these beans, man, for me, that's the worst. Now, one thing I'm fairly lucky is this sewing machine handles Mochi Minky very well. It really doesn't do anything too weird with it. Really, all the problems kind of lie with me. And really, that's really the pinning process. I haven't quite figured out how to pin it down and how to stretch it into the right shape at the right spots. And I always tend to find a little bit of a wrinkle that forms in kind of a bad spot. And it's hard to get those out without unsewing everything or starting over, which by that point, I'm pretty much done with it and call it good. So, I don't know. Most of my problems really lie with working with Mochi Minky. Maybe I should just go with basic Minky, but no, I have to work with Mochi on this one. And if you've never worked with Mochi Minky, that stuff is kind of slippery and kind of hard to work with because it stretches in all sorts of different directions. Like I said, this sewing machine, for me, it works great. It doesn't mess with the minky a whole lot. A lot of people do have problems with it with the sewing machine where it just pulls it in weird directions and screws it all up. But I think for the most part, all my problems are me, and really at this point is my super crappy scissors trying to cut everything out, because I only could take about a 1 centimeter snip at a time, which kinda takes a while, and it's not exactly pretty. With these projects being kind of my own little test beds, I wanted to try something different here as well. So normally I'd put the claws in at the end of the darts there and kind of work them in at this point. Well, I always find that the claws tend to start pointing in weird directions that I really don't want them to do. So I decided to close them up completely and then add the claws at the very end by making razor blade slits and then poking the claws through. Now, in the end, I think it worked a little bit better than just relying upon the pattern itself. I really think this worked out quite a bit better for me. I don't know if it's something everybody else does, but I liked it, and so I think I'll continue with that pattern. Anyways, the next thing I hardly ever do, because, well, it's just kind of a pain in the butt and I don't know how to do it, is making the cuff. So I put about 1.5 inch little piece on this mochi minky, and, well, I knew I didn't want to use Sharpie on it because that'd bleed through real easy, so I tried pencil. Pencil didn't work super great, but it gave me just enough, really, so I can see it and cut it out. Again, I have super crappy scissors, and cutting strips with super crappy scissors with mochi minky, if you've never done it, you should try it because it's not fun. This project's been all about trying new things. I haven't made cuffs before, and figured I could probably figure it out. Well, after I completed them, I discovered all the things I kind of screwed up, which overall was probably just working with 1.5 inches. I needed a little bit more to work with than that, just like my wife says. So in the end, what do I think of these paws? Well, I think they turned out to be probably about a medium quality paw. There's good things and bad, and overall I think the pattern worked out the way I wanted it. Did I get it in the right position? No. Did I sew it well? I think I did. I'm pretty happy with how those turned out. Did I like the way the cuffs worked out? No, I didn't. Pretty much anything that was minky related, not a fan of how it turned out. But in the end, I'm pretty happy with the project because it was all about learning. And for me, learning things of what to do and what not to do really just kind of made my day. Despite the paws turning out to be probably low to medium quality, I feel like the project was a huge success because I really figured out this pattern work and how to sew them with the right amount of seam allowance and really create a nice solid project where the seams aren't super loose like I did with Jinx 2.0 just a few weeks ago. Now don't get me wrong, I love Jinx and how she turned out. She's one of my favorite projects to date, but the thing that I didn't like about her is some of the pattern work. Those pieces were a little bit too loose, and this one, I think they turned out a whole lot better. Well, if you're still hanging out with me, I appreciate you staying, and hopefully you learned something today, because I sure did. I appreciate you tuning in today, and encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you again, and we'll catch you on the next one.